There's a habit that quietly builds more wealth than almost anything else you could do with money. It's not a stock pick. It's not a side hustle. It's not some secret investment only rich people know about. It's a single setting buried in your banking app that most people never turn on. Here's what it is, and here's why something this small ends up mattering more than almost every other financial decision you'll make this year. The habit is automatic transfers, moving a fixed amount of money out of your checking account and into savings or investments on a schedule without you having to decide to do it every single time. That's it. That's the whole habit. And if it sounds too simple to matter, that's exactly why most people never do it. Let's talk about why this works, because the mechanism isn't really about the money. It's about what happens in the moment right before you would have spent it. Every dollar that sits in your checking account is a decision waiting to happen. You see the balance. You feel like you have room. And somewhere between seeing that number and the end of the month, a portion of it quietly turns into dinners out, a subscription you forgot about, a sale that felt too good to skip. None of these decisions feel irresponsible in the moment. They just happen, one small choice at a time, until the balance is lower than you expected and you're not entirely sure where it went. Automatic transfers remove that decision entirely. The money leaves before you ever get the chance to make a choice about it. You're not relying on willpower on a random Tuesday. You're relying on a setting you configured once when you were thinking clearly, calm, and not standing in front of a tempting purchase. This is sometimes called paying yourself first, and the phrase is doing real work. Most people's mental order of operations is spend, then save whatever's left. Automatic transfers flip that order completely. Save first, then spend whatever's left. The math is identical. The outcome is not, because what's left over after saving first is a number you never see as available to spend in the first place. Now let's talk about what this actually adds up to, because the numbers surprise most people the first time they run them. And say you automate a transfer of $200 a month into an investment account. That's less than $7 a day, roughly the cost of one takeout coffee and a snack. Over 10 years without a single dollar of investment growth, that's $24,000, just from the transfers themselves. Add even a modest average annual return, and the number climbs well past that, because you're not just saving money, you're giving it time to compound. Compounding is the part that makes automatic transfers so much more powerful than manual saving. Growth on your money creates more growth, and more growth creates more after that, but only if the money is actually invested and only if it's been sitting there long enough to build momentum. A habit that starts in your 20s has decades longer to compound than the same habit started in your 40s, which means starting small and starting early can meaningfully outperform starting big and starting late. To put a rough shape on that difference, someone who invests $200 a month starting at 25 and stops entirely at 35, walking away after just 10 years of contributions, can end up with more money by retirement than someone who starts at 35 and keeps contributing the same amount every month for the next 3 decades straight. The first person contributed far less money overall. They just gave it far more time to compound, and time turns out to matter more than almost anything else in this equation. Here's a detail that trips a lot of people up when they first set this up, and it's worth getting right. Where the automatic transfer goes matters just as much as the fact that it happens at all. Moving money automatically into a regular savings account that pays close to nothing in interest is better than not saving at all, but it's leaving most of the benefit on the table. The real compounding power shows up when that automated transfer lands somewhere that actually grows, a high-yield savings account for money you might need soon, or an investment account for money you won't touch for years. The automation handles the discipline. Where it lands handles the growth. Picture a fairly ordinary version of this. Someone sets up an automatic transfer of $150 a month into an investment account the same week they start a new job, mostly because a coworker mentioned doing the same thing. They barely notice it for the first few months. Their spending adjusts almost immediately, the way a room adjusts to a slightly dimmer light, without any conscious decision being made. 5 years later, they check the account out of curiosity more than urgency and find a number that's meaningfully larger than the simple math of $150 times 60 months would suggest. Because growth has been quietly stacking on top of growth the entire time. Nothing dramatic happened in those 5 years. No windfall, no lucky trade, no moment of extraordinary discipline. Just the same transfer, landing on the same day, month after month, doing the one thing it was set up to do. There's a psychological reason this habit works so much better than intention-based saving, and it's worth understanding because it explains why so many financially disciplined, intelligent people still struggle to save consistently on their own. Every time you have to actively decide to save, you're spending willpower, a resource that's surprisingly limited and gets used up by everything else competing for your attention that day. Deciding what to eat, whether to answer that email, whether today is the day you finally transfer some money into savings. By the time saving even crosses your mind, willpower has often already been spent elsewhere. Automation doesn't ask anything of your willpower. It happens whether you're focused, distracted, tired, or having the best or worst day of your month. This is also why automatic transfers tend to survive lifestyle changes that manual saving usually doesn't. A raise arrives and spending quietly expands to match it, a pattern common enough that it has its own name. Lifestyle creep. A slightly nicer apartment, a few more dinners out, a subscription or two that felt affordable now that the number on the paycheck looks bigger. None of it feels reckless in the moment. It just absorbs the raise almost entirely, so a year later the person is earning meaningfully more than before and somehow no closer to their savings goals than when they started. But if your automatic transfer was already set as a percentage of income, or if you simply increase it slightly every time your income goes up before you get used to the extra money, the savings habit grows right alongside your lifestyle instead of getting left behind by it. There are a couple of ways people quietly sabotage this habit without realizing it, and they're worth naming before you set anything up yourself. The first is automating an amount that's genuinely uncomfortable, then panicking 2 weeks later when checking is tighter than expected and turning the whole system off entirely. A canceled automation teaches your brain that saving is the thing that gets cut first when money feels tight, which is the exact opposite lesson you want it to learn. The second mistake is setting the transfer and then never revisiting it again for years, even as income grows substantially. The habit still works, technically, but it stops compounding as much of your growing income as it could, quietly leaving money on the table that could have been building alongside every raise instead of only the first one. Let's talk about how to actually set this up well, because the mechanics matter more than people expect. Time the transfer to land right after payday, not somewhere in the middle of the month after spending, has already started eating into the balance. If you're paid every 2 weeks, set the transfer for the same day every time, so it becomes as automatic and unremarkable as your rent or your phone bill. Start with an amount that won't force you to notice its absence immediately. It's far better to automate $50 consistently for a year than to automate $300 and cancel the whole thing after 2 months because it felt too aggressive. It also helps to think of the automated amount the same way you'd think of a bill you already owe, rather than money that's still technically available if something comes up. Bills don't get negotiated with every month based on how the checking account happens to look on a given day. They simply get paid on schedule because the alternative carries a real consequence. Treating your own savings transfer with that same seriousness, as a fixed obligation rather than a flexible extra, is often the difference between a habit that survives a busy year and one that quietly disappears the first time money feels tight. And if you want to accelerate this without feeling it at all, there's one more move worth knowing. Every time you get a raise, increase your automatic transfer by half of the raise before your spending has a chance to adjust to the new number. You still feel richer because half of every raise still reaches your regular spending. But the other half quietly compounds for decades without you ever having to make a single willpower-driven decision about it again. None of this requires research, timing the market, or picking the right stock. It requires exactly one decision, made one time, and then never having to make it again. There's a habit that quietly builds more wealth than almost anything else you could do with money. You've had access to it this entire time. It was just waiting for you to turn it on.